Hello, everyone. This is a disclaimer before you all get into the episode. Before you begin before you continue, I would like you to understand that anything and everything that we say on this podcast is our own opinion and our own, as well as these are also going to be spoiler alerts now. That if you have not seen this anime or have read the manga book, if there is one, then you should not probably continue until you have done so, unless you do not care about spoilers. This is just a disclaimer before moving forward. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second episode of Anime Eclipse. And I'm Red, otherwise known as James. And then I have my partner Leo here with us. Today we're going to talk about Soul Eater.
Hey everyone, my name is Leo, and today we're going to be talking about Soul Eater. Soul Eater is an anime that revolves around these kids that are either tasked as Meisters, which are weapons wielders, or they're weapons themselves. The purpose of these children is to battle the evil spirit called the Kishin in order to save the world. This is one of my favorite mangas of all time. You guys are gonna enjoy this episode. All right, guys. So Soul Eater is another behemoth of an anime and manga. It will take us hours to deep dive into it. So for anyone who has watched the show, this is kind of like to restart your interest in it. Maybe start the conversation with your friends. For those who have never seen Soul Eater, hopefully by the end of this podcast, if you decide to stay, we'll probably encourage you to watch it on Hulu. Me personally, like I said, it's one of my favorite mangas of all time, but I haven't read it in a few years. If you have seen it, what I did was I got all my information from the Soul Eater fandom, and I'll just give you a quick review of everything that happened.
And as a disclaimer, if you haven't watched any of this, if you haven't read any of this, I highly recommend that you to stop what you're doing now, turn us off, and go do that now. And then come back, so that way we're not confusing you in any way possible. Also, I strongly recommend that if you're going to continue watching this, keep in mind that this is our opinions and our takes on things. We may not get to every topic on the subject of Soul Eater, but if we missed it, we're sorry, but we're going to go ahead and get right into this. Alright, so to start things off, we are going to talk about our favorite characters and the reasons why we like them. So, I really like Death the Kid and his whole concept of him having a problem with everything that isn't symmetrical or in that same pattern or just identical. It has to be exactly the same. But I like someone more than him, and that's Professor Stein. He is the smartest character in all of their World Series, and on top of that, the English voice actor I really like. I don't know his name off the top of my head, but I really enjoy that character and how he interacts with all the characters and how he's not for one side or the other, even though he's on the good side. He just does he does that whole speech that we're going to probably talk about later. So who's your favorite, Leo?
So I have a few favorite characters. So my top three favorite characters are Corona, for a lot of reasons that we're going to get into later. Dr. Stein, exactly like Redman here, because he is just an amazing character that we are going to talk about later in the episode. But the character I want to highlight the most is my favorite character, Blackstar. Blackstar to me is my favorite character because he's just the one that I see myself as the most. We're both very energetic, have to be the center of attention when we're with our friends, and like I said, we're going to deep dive into this more, but this character hates to lose, and that is a very pinnacle point in his development.
There's too many characters that I can go on about who I like, and I can say some other things. Like, I don't know if you know, but the guy who becomes a zombie is actually the voice actor of the ogre in Yu Yu Hakusho, and he does some other voices and stuff like that. They threw him in here. So that aside, my other favorite character, it's not my top, but I just want to bring it up. And I'm actually surprised you didn't bring up Medusa as your favorite at all. But Death himself is one of my huge favorite people, as well as Justin. But they're not up there.
Wait a minute, hold on. Medusa is not my favorite character, but she is Out of the 70, almost 80 animes that I watched, she is my top 5 favorite villains. And I'm going to tell you guys why later.
Alright, Black Blood and Madness. Series is pretty much based around madness because it's what happens to these characters. Then they become corrupted. That's how the Kishin are born. That's how these Kishin come around. They're super into madness. Some of the other characters start going into madness throughout the series, and then they get better. Professor Stein is one of them. I don't remember if Corona is one of them. Someone else also goes into madness. And then the main bad guy, the Kishin, is basically nothing but pure madness. And he's going to spread it throughout all of the world. And they're trying to put a stop to it. But Leo is going to be able to tell you more about this stuff than I probably could.
So like I said in the beginning, I had to do a deep dive review, and I got all my information from the Soul Eater fandom. And so from the Soul Eater fandom, they said that madness is the negative energy within our hearts that every soul has. The more madness that you have, the more of a negative output that you have that leads to like chaotic or erratic tendencies. So like with Corona their black blood affects people in a way that they lose their sense of fear. Now with that being said, this madness can be used as a power system, much like how Soul uses his madness from the first episode after he got slashed with Ragnarok. The black blood mixes in with his blood. And now he uses his madness for soul resonance between him and Maka, Death the Kid and his weapons, Blackstar and his weapons. Madness is not also our fears, but is also our deepest desires. And we see that in characters like Dr. Stein, where he's fighting to succumb to his sadism. If you guys know what that means, sadism is like your pleasure in hurting others.
I don't remember. I mean, Corona and Stein are probably the two major characters besides the villain himself. Is there anyone else that's affected by this? You brought up Soul, but his gets used for a whole different reason than I think the others do. I don't know if there's anyone else affected. I don't know if Medusa's affected or not, but she wants to bring out the Kishin and let it loose.
So every character in this series has a form of madness. Blackstar has the madness for power. He desires more power. Death himself actually has a madness because he's a great being and his presence alone can affect people. His madness is his job, basically the order of life and death balance.
That's interesting. Well, since we're talking about the madness, is there anything we want to say about the villain himself? Because I think, besides Medusa being what she is, I think the Kishin is truly and absolutely an amazing villain that happens throughout this whole thing. And nobody can stop him. Nobody. I don't care what you tell me. Nobody can stop this man. I don't care how the anime ends. He's like super strong. Nothing they do works. It seems as though madness is just the ultimate power.
The crazy thing is how you're describing the Kishin is that yes, he is the most overpowered character in the show. But the crazy thing is he's really just a pawn in Medusa's scheme. She's the mastermind behind everything because her ultimate goal is really just to experiment and perfect black blood. Black blood is the weaponization of regular blood. It can harden and stiffen. And this experimentation began when she mixed black blood with her own child, her biological child, Corona. Medusa is an absolute savage. She is, in my opinion, she is one of the smartest villains in anime. Second to Lord Aizen from Bleach. And let me explain why she's the smartest. This woman almost single-handedly tricks Death twice in the entire series. The first time was when she went undercover in DWMA as a nurse. How Death didn't notice that, I will never understand. Awakens the Kishin, and then later in the story, she holds a little girl's body hostage so Death can't kill her, and then tells him, let me commit this operation to kill my sister Arachne. She takes control, they defeat her sister, takes over her sister's body, and then continues the bullshit she was doing in the beginning, which is perfecting the black blood. And then she goes so far to perfect her black blood that she manipulates, uses positive reinforcement, and confuses the madness within Corona, causing them to kill her, completing their transformation into a Kishin. And so with that, because when Corona killed her mother, that was her last support system. She's lost. She's betrayed the DWMA. She's now seen as a villain to society. She has officially killed her own mother, her own resolve, her purpose, her being, her everything.
So, I just have to say, you've already stolen the words out of my mouth before I could even get them out. But yeah, I'm gonna have to say that out of all the anime I've seen, which is not as much as you have by any means, but she is definitely one of the smartest villains I've come across. And not only that, but she ends up while Professor Stein is falling into madness, getting him to do stuff for her too until he's broken out of it and all this other stuff, and then she gets killed eventually. I already have to agree, staying like steps ahead. She already has a plan to do everything before people happen, with very little mistakes here and there. Yeah, if it wasn't just for her dying, then and underestimating a particular thing, then I think she probably would have got away with a lot more.
Now, when you say dying, are you talking about the anime version of dying?
It's the only version I know.
I completely forgot. You know how crazy? Do you know how embedded this bitch's effect is in Corona? Even after death, she is still haunting Corona's subconscious.
Oh yeah, and even in the anime, you see that, like, just the trauma that Corona has been through. It even shows in the anime, even after she's dead, that it has effects on Corona's mental state. So it doesn't go away.
And again, like kids who have been abused by their parents in any form can relate to this because that damage will never go away, unfortunately.
So, with that being said, we're going to move on to Corona, but I do have a question for you. Maybe you could already answer this. But what if the Kishin got the black blood? Unless it comes from him anyway, because I don't remember. But what if you made him more powerful than he already was with madness and gave him the mix with the black blood? Unless that was Medusa's intent. But then he would become even more unstoppable than he already was. Because Death already trapped him once, didn't want him getting out. And for some reason now he couldn't do it again.
So actually, in the anime, that's what he's injected with. So when Death captured the Kishin and wraps him up in a bag of his own skin, the only thing he didn't have was blood. And once he got the black blood made by Medusa, all hell broke loose. It kind of just amplified his powers.
Okay, that makes more sense. So that would make it to where he's as strong as he is now then. Moving on to Corona, who I had a hard time at the start, fixed later, knowing if it was a male or female. I thought it was female at first. Just throwing that out there. Also, Corona is just a huge character. Got lots of problems. Lots of mommy issues, left alone to her own devices, injected with the black blood, has to deal with this thing that's attached to her called Ragnarok, and has to deal with learning new friends, never had friends before, and it's just a whole bunch of stuff to go through. I'm not even going to cover a lot of it here, just because I'm encouraging you guys to watch or read this. There's just so much to do with Corona, and I'm going to let Leo give her take on Corona.
For you to call Corona it's hilarious to me. But it is canon that Corona technically does not have a gender. This is kind of common in animes. So no matter what adaptation, you can call them either boy or girl or them. But Corona, from start to finish, is just a tragic character. They are not born from love. They are born for the sake of science and experimentation. Their first task was to kill a bunny, where their mother Medusa says, if you don't kill this bunny, you're not going to eat. And so she locks them in a room with the bunny, and they are abused by their weapon, which is fused to their blood, Ragnarok, and abused for hours until they kill the bunny. And that's just like the first instance of their abuse. Like, they have years of abuse, and then we start the main series where they meet Maka and Soul, and they're temporarily transformed into the good side, but then later they're easily manipulated by their mother Medusa to turn back to their side. And with that, this character goes through a lot of manipulation, is seen as a bad guy. Also,
on the topic of Corona, since we brought up Ragnarok is attached, I really like Ragnarok as a character, even though it's attached to Corona. It reminds me a lot about Ryuk from Death Note, which is also the previous episode we talked all about that. Go watch it if you haven't already. But I really like him separate from Corona. Just that comedic stuff that's just put in there. even though, because he doesn't really do much else. He just comes out and says things and makes it more funny than it is most of the time. I don't know if it's any different in the manga book.
It's not. He's a dick. He's 100% a dick.
So, that being said, unless you got something else you want to add.
Corona's ending. So this is a major spoiler. Just go ahead and skip ahead if you don't want to hear this. But Corona's ending is that after all the sins that they have done, all the killing, the abuse, and everything like that, they're not really concerned about that. The only thing that they really care for is Maka Alborn, which to me is the only reason why that bitch is useful.
Okay. Alright. So now we're going to talk about Professor Stein and probably one of the greatest moments he has in the whole show. But there's many others. We don't have time to get to all of them at all. And I haven't read the book, and I'm sure there's a lot more in there. His truth speech he has with Death the Kid in episode 37, about 17 and a half minutes in, he goes on with Death the Kid to talk about the reality of what truth is, and explaining to him right or wrong is just a construct of the mind, and that it's really just a gray area. Because in reality it is. It's just a gray concept. What you think is right and what I think is right is completely different. The only way we determine anything is because people in high authority have just decided that they're going to make it the rules of what's right and wrong. But in reality, there's no such thing as right or wrong. You could think that what you're doing is right and other people are going to think that's wrong. But you're not right and you're not wrong either. It's just someone's opinion. It's completely gray in this world, and he does the best job of explaining it in his own words. Sadly, it gets cut off at the end by other stuff happening in the anime, but it's a really good speech to listen to from the both of them.
I just want to piggyback off that speech and say that what's beautiful about that scene is the literal character designs and the overall characters themselves. So you have Death the Kid, who's supposed to be the symbol of balance, right and wrong, and his character design is literally black and white. And then you have Dr. Stein telling him that no, that's not right, and his character design is gray and everything. And what's interesting about Dr. Stein's overall character is that it's not just in this scene that he embodies that gray area of right and wrong. It's throughout his entire life. He doesn't believe in blindly following authority. He's even been seen to bend the rules as a child. As an adult, he's seen to take pleasures in sadist acts, such as performing experimentations on Spirit, the current Death Scythe, torturing his students to a slight degree. And because of these indulgences that he has, he is very easily susceptible to madness, to the madness of pleasures.
Also, I think, so the thing that starts off that whole speech, I think he had the best question to start it off with Death the Kid. I think when he simply asked, who's telling you that these things are right or wrong? And then he goes on into that's probably just the best opening thing. It's like, who the hell's telling you this stuff? Who's telling you what's right and what's wrong? How do you know? That's probably like just the best way to just go into it.
And then when you put it into that perspective, you can say that it's a child listening to their father, but in reality, it's a person listening to God, and that can go into a whole religious obedience thing.
And or an authority figure that he brings up in his speech. Yeah, I mean, it's just an amazing thing. Makes you think. I'm just sad that it gets cut off because a character breaks in and they have to stop the conversation. But other than that, it's just one of those great things. And again, he's just an amazing character. Anything he does, anything he says, anytime that man gets screen time in this show, it's probably like the best thing for me, aside from Justin or Death the Kid himself, or Death even himself. But
well, since you brought up Justin, I almost forgot about his ass. Let me tell you about Justin. So Justin Law is an example of extreme obedience to religion. In the beginning, we see him basically swear his allegiance to Death himself, which is the god of this world. And then in the manga off camera, he becomes affected by madness of the clown. The clown arc was also really good. You guys should read that. Because of this madness, he later sees this clown as his new god and goes as far as attacking the DWMA as a result.
That's stuff I don't know, but it's very interesting. what really caught my attention for him was, aside from his religious aspect of things, I can honestly care less about that part. It was the fact of his introduction when they send him out to go help and take care of the arachnid thing going on. He has to fight the chainsaw dude. Totally forget his name. But he has to fight him, and he just goes on his very merry way. Never seen a character do this before. Starts off, puts in headphones, and completely ignores everything and everybody and just goes to work. And people are trying to talk to him, and he can't hear a damn thing. He's not going to get distracted. He's not going to get this. And it's one of those things that I could say that in animes, you know how people talk too much. The bad guy talks too much, or the good guy's talking too much. There's too much dialogue, and that's why we have like 3, 5, 4 episodes of whatever the fight's going on. No, not this man. He just puts in headphones and says, fuck it. This guy don't care. He's going to skip all that nonsense. Just get straight to work.
Now, if I was fighting him, that would piss me off. Like, I understand why Grieco was mad, because I got mad just listening to that. If you don't respect me and my gangsters...
I mean, like I said, I completely understand his frustration, but it's just that simple fact that, like I said, it defeats the whole trope of, oh, we're going to have all these dialogues as we fight thing. Nah, he takes that completely away from them, and I am completely happy with that. It was completely different, completely changed everything, and just, he got my respect super right there. And he does it to just anybody. Anytime he starts a fight, that's the minute he does. He just gets right into his muse and just, bam, just takes care of business.
I enjoy that level of disrespect. Well, since you talked about your favorite fight scene, is it cool if I start talking about mine?
Oh, yeah. Go straight ahead.
Redman here just talked about his favorite fight scene, which is in the anime. My favorite fight scene is from the manga. My favorite fight scene is the final battle between Black Star, I forgot his name, Mifune? Is that it?
Yeah, it's Mifune. It's the samurai guy. Yeah.
So the final battle. So the thing that led up to this is Mifune is kind of like a measure or checkpoint of Black Star's maturity as a warrior. You know, when they first fight, Black Star's kind of not lackadaisical, but he's very amateurish as a fighter. And then he progresses more because he wants more. He wants to be seen as a warrior god. And so by this third battle, Black Star has come to the conclusion that he wants power so that no one can beat him. Not his friends, not God himself, no one. He wants power for himself in order to protect his friends and everything. And so in order to do that, to become a warrior god, you have to let go of negative emotions. You have to let go of fear, hesitation, resentment, all of that. You have to fight in the most earnest way possible. And when he finally does that, he finally transcends to the god, basically a god of war, which is really funny because that's parallel to Kid Death, who has to go through 3 stages himself in order to become a god of his world.
So, I will. So that whole fight scene, I'm just gonna have to fight you all the way. So, I am not a huge fan of the last fight they have. It's great, it's fine, but I feel like the second fight is the best. The first one after that, then the last one. But I'm also, not to go against your man, but at the same time, even though he's not on my favorite list of characters, I think Mifune's better.
And that's perfectly fine, because if you think of it like this, it's the student trying to transcend their master. So of course you're going to like the master better.
That, and I like the way he fights better. That whole thing where he throws those chunk of swords in the air, and then all that shit happens, like, just bam. And then goes into his own little fighting mode. That is completely a badass thing, and just how that's completely different. Like I said, this anime does a lot of things different than other animes, and I give it a lot of credit for that.
I mean, if you're thinking like that, there is one more character in anime who fights like that, and that's Killer Bee from Naruto.
Haven't got that far. Still have to get there.
What I really like about those two is that by the end of the manga, Black Star has all these cool new tricks and everything. And what I love the most is that Mifune finally sees Black Star as a man and not a child. Now, let me scratch that. He finally sees Black Star as a warrior and not just a child. And to me, that was just awesome.
Yeah, he just earns his respect, which is what you get out of it by the end of it. I do wish that he became more with the group afterwards, but I understand why not. Because the main cast is just the 3. Or the 6, 7 if you count the 2 girls that Kid has. But So, alright. So, the part that I want to talk about the most, that drove me super crazy, even though I've only watched the anime twice and I haven't read the books. Just this ending, in my opinion, mine alone, whether you agree with it or not, is just the worst ending I have ever had to deal with in the whole thing. We go from all these characters, all these main characters, the Maka, the Soul, the Black Star, his weapon, and the kid, and just all this stuff. You watch them grow up, you watch them get better, they learn these new techniques so they can fight the Kishin at the end. They do all this stuff, and then they sit there, and they're sitting there and they're fighting him. It looks like they're getting somewhere, and then he stops them. They're like, oh shit, now what? And then they come back, and they have these new techniques that are supposed to work. You're like, yeah, this should work. And then they do them, and it doesn't do a damn thing. And you're like, oh shit, now what? Okay? This whole anime is pulling at your heartstrings, going, oh damn, what do we do now? From a logical standpoint, everything that these kids have learned to stop this thing isn't working. Makes you, and you know this is going to be the end right here. How are they going to pull it off? The Kishin literally has Maka on the ground, pretty much on top of her, gonna end it right then and there, and somehow, some stupid magical little thing happens, and she says, well, I have courage. And somehow, even the Kishin is confused. He's like, I don't know what that is. And then she brings up bravery. And I'm not even going to get into depth about what triggers all that. But she then just takes a punch to his face, and it just starts to shatter. You're telling me that all she had to do was punch him in the face, and it was over. Even though they did all this stuff, all this spectacular attacks, all these great epic proportions of things, and it didn't do a damn thing to him. But all it took was a single punch. Even the bad guy is confused, and that's how it ends. Somehow the good guys win. Welcome to plot armor. Welcome to the good guys have to win. I was okay with the bad guy winning if it had to. I was okay with a terrible ending, but no, we had to go this route. The good guy just had to win. I am not for this childish cartoon thing of, oh well, I have courage, so I win. You don't have that. So, but I guess whatever Leo's take is on this, as well as Leo will explain how I guess it ends differently in the manga book, but I am just completely upset with the ending. I am completely mad about it, and I love the anime all the way up until that moment.
So while Redman calms down in a corner, I will tell you how it ends in the manga. Are you alright there, buddy?
I will be fine, but I refuse to watch the ending to this again.
Okay, so in the manga, like I said before, Medusa is killed by Corona. And so in turn, they're now in the process of doing their mother's final bidding by becoming a Kishin. So the original Kishin is currently on the moon. Corona goes to the moon. Corona tries to devour the Kishin. And a lot of the battle happens between basically two gods, which is Black Star and Death the Kid, and then Soul and Maka, and then Spirit the current Death Scythe. A bunch of things happen. In the end, Death dies. Kid is now the new official Shikigami of this world. Corona is now embedded on the moon with the Black Blood, with the Kishin, pretty much for the rest of their life. And all in order to save the new world. Death the Kid creates a new world where witches and everyone else gets along. There will no longer be any more Death Scythes because Death Scythes are made from the souls of witches, which is why they hated the school so much. And I think that is everything. So the manga is very different. So Redman can calm down.
Well, when I go and read it and give you my opinion, if I like it or not differently, it sounds like it's got more stuff that I'm going to enjoy than what we were given. While we're still on the same topic, before we get to the ending of everything, so with just the anime thing and what I brought up already, and from your memory of the anime, what do you think of that ending? Not the book ending.
I find it very laughable. I'm not going to deny that the ending was fucking hilarious. But I understand what the creators were trying to do because the Kishin is the embodiment of fear. And how to defeat fear is courage. I feel like they had a good idea, but the way they went about it was completely wrong.
even if they did it from an emotional standpoint. They could have done it in a more logical standpoint, whether it was from just something else other than a punch to the face. Like, I wish that her new form of attack would have just worked. It would have just made more sense. Like, it just would have. But no, since they wanted to go, hey, that didn't work. Even I, as a watcher, is sitting here going, now what? Now what do we do? And it's so you can't do that to people. We're just gonna take your emotions, we're gonna rip them out and be like, well, we're just gonna throw it on the ground and be like, here you go. That's how it ends. Nothing spectacular, nothing crazy, nothing very anticlimactic is how this is.
Now, I will give them credit because the idea that Maka is able to utilize her weapons DNA was actually kind of cool, and I wish they would have continued that in the manga or explored that a bit more, but they did something different with her soul.
I mean, to each their own.
Nah, man, say how you feel. Say it with your chest.
I already did. These people, I'm not against the creators and what they've chosen to do. I'm just mad about how they went about doing it. I mean, you've already said it, but it's just, it could have been done so much better. And even then, why they didn't just follow the book, I don't know. I don't know. This is, again, just one of the worst ending things to me. I don't hold anything back against this thing. Where I've never watched an anime where I've been this upset with an ending, and or another movie for that factor. But
all right, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our podcast. Really appreciate it. So just quick food for thought questions. For anyone who has not seen the anime but decided to listen to the podcast, when you do go watch the anime, do you mind going in with the question of, if you were in this world, would you be a weapon or would you be a Meister? And for those who have seen the anime or have read the manga, my question to you is, as you are right now, if you were put into in the world of Soul Eater, would you succumb to madness? And if so, what madness would you fall into?
Those are interesting questions. But as we close this out, if, again, and I'll say this again, even though I said this earlier, if you haven't watched the anime, if you haven't read the books, I highly recommend doing so, even though you got this far to hear my rant about how this ends. Whether you agree with me or not, do it anyway. Go watch it anyway. If you have to, don't watch the last episode. But it's up to you.
And again, I personally got all my information for today's podcast from the Soul Eater fandom. Shouts to them for making all of the characters, all of the arcs, all of the side questions so accessible. Again, if you have already experienced Soul Eater, I do recommend going there to go refresh your memory on this world.
That being said, we will see you guys later into the next episode.